Okay, so it's mid-September and I want to be doing stuff down here, but I don't want to be sitting down here for a particularly long time. So I'm beginning to work on a project that's going to last probably until the new year, with kind of one major bit at the beginning and then lots to do with the fiddly bits throughout the month. So I've decided to make a chess set. Most people would do this on the lathe, but I don't have the skills or the space for one, so I've designed the pieces to fit on pieces of 1x1, 1 inch by 1 inch pine strip. So most of these are identical either side, and things like the bishop and the knight obviously have slightly different shapes. So I'm working my way through, and I've done the first couple, and I've discovered a few things that have come in handy. When doing something with quite a detailed end pattern, do all the sides first and then take them back together and then do the end, so you've got something solid to work with. Doing it this way, I'm keeping them as long as possible for as long as possible, so they're easier to hold on to, easier to control. And I've also chosen one edge, the first cut that comes off I'm keeping to one side and then bundling back together again, so I can use that to build a stay inside the box, so they all line up together. At least that's the plan. So with a piece of 1x1 that's not free, I could have done it in one, because the shop sells them at 2 meters 40, but I couldn't find any unknotty ones, and I ended up picking the best two, the straightest with the fewest knots. And what I've done is I've marked around knots on all 4 sides, just so that I don't end up lining things up on top of knots. So now I'm just working through the shapes here, and I'm also going to be cutting some drafts pieces. So these are 1.5 centimeters wide, and I've got 15, well, I've got 30 to do, so I can have 2 sets of 15, so that I can do a backgammon and drafts on the box. So this is the first part, and once I've got all of these cut, I can quite easily put them to one side and then work on them individually. So it's going to be short periods of work rather than long periods. So I'm going to spend a couple of hours cutting these out, and I'll stick them in the box and get round to them later on. So that seems a better option than sitting out here freezing cold. Okay, so it's taken about 5 hours to do all of these, and I've just bundled them by shape, so that I can go back through and do the finishing on them. Each one needs a slightly different touch on the finishing. I'm actually going to put veneer on these, so I'm not too concerned about the finish, but they do need to be prepared, at least for the veneer, and have some extra bits done to them before and after the veneer goes on. So I'm going to work on these in stages, as and when weather permits, really. And I'm not going to let you watch all of it, because it's going to be quite tedious. So I'll show you kind of the highlights as I go along. So that shouldn't make this too long for a video. So I'm untaping and trying wherever possible to keep hold of the tape, so I don't have to use any fresh tape. So you can lose the corner pieces, you're not going to need those. And I'm just pulling off the paper or any tape that's on there, so I can mark these. So on the large piece here that I'm going to use for a stay eventually, I'm just identifying what piece it is and what number, just so they're easier to fit together, and I'm just putting a number on each of these other bits. Right, and then removing tape from this side, from the bottom here. Now this does need to come off. I've otherwise it's going to get in the way of the veneer. So make sure you've got off any tape or anything that's stuck on these ones. And first things first, level out the bottom. So I've just got my sanding board here, so it's 60 grit on now. I'm not too concerned about it being perfect at this stage, just needs to get a start on there, and again put the number on the bottom. And then using a piece of sandpaper, I'm just going to go over the shape here, making sure that I'm rounding over the bottom edge here but not rounding around it, so each shape remains kind of square to the other one. Okay, so before I move on to doing any more of the kind of the sanding and whatever, I need to get the veneer sorted out for each of the pieces. So for the light side of the board, I've got aspen and what I think is maple. So I'm going to have two colours either side matching that way. So there's slight variation within the pieces themselves. I've got some more aspen and some ash, which are very similar, which I'll use for the board. So just to keep the colours together in kind of, you know, I'm also using oak on some of those as well. So they're all somewhat light. And then for the dark side, I'm using walnut and mahogany. So again, it's rich dark colours rather than dark colours. So I've marked them all out, and what I've done is I've made all my strips slightly larger than the wood itself. So the wood is 1 inch thick, which is 2.4 millimeters, 2.4 centimeters even, and I've done these at about 3 wide, so I've got a bit of leeway. So I've marked all these out, and now I've got to start cutting them, which is going to be interesting. So I'm going to use a blade to do the straight cuts along the grain, and then just scissors to do the sideways cuts. So that's going to be a lot easier to do and work through. So I'm going to get these done and sorted out, and then I'll divide them so they're sitting with the appropriate pieces, so that I can work through those as I get to that stage. So it's going to be a bit more of a tedious job, but a lot of these jobs are fairly tedious. Okay, so the key to cutting veneer is to have a very sharp blade and to be patient. Particularly if you're cutting curves, then you need to be particularly patient. But just for a straight line, you need to make sure you've got a ruler with a rubber or some kind of slightly, not sticky, but firm base that will hold on to what you're working on. Make sure you're holding it securely, and just use the weight of the knife. If you press down too hard, it's just going to bind into your board and go nowhere. And if you're pressing too hard, you're more likely to come off and go on at weird angles. So you need to be up against the ruler and just using the weight of the blade three or four passes, and you get a clean cut. In this, I'm not concerned about it being particularly clean, because it's most of the edge is going to get taken off, but in terms of practice, that's the way to go. Okay, so these have had a sand on all the faces, so they're smooth and most of the dust has gone. And I've also cut out all my bits of veneer, and I've bundled them into sets of about 4, or enough for 4. So this way I can work through gradually each stage. So I'm going to put this set, so this is 8 pieces of veneer, which are 3 by 5 centimeters, so they're slightly bigger than what I need, which should be useful later on. So I'm going to put them in my little bowl with some water. Now this is just cold water, there's nothing special about it, and just enough to cover. And obviously, being wood, they float, so I'm just going to use a glass just to weigh them down so they get completely soaked. So they're going to probably take an hour or so, hour and a half to get soft. So whilst they're softening, I'm going to sort out some finish on the tops of these. All of these are going to have some pyro doing on the tops just to fill that in, because I'm not going to be able to get a piece of veneer on there neatly. So what I'm doing is any bit that's going to be exposed at the end, I'm going to colour down as much as possible. Now I'm doing this just on the very top. I don't want to come over again, because I want to keep the edges kind of angled rather than being curved. Okay, so I've done the pyrography, and pretty much without trying I've managed to get a difference in colour. I'm not sure how well that's going to come out on camera, but half of these will come out fairly light and half are fairly dark. So I think that's going to work without having to add an extra layer of burn. So I've just separated off the dark ones for now. I'm doing 4 at a time so I can work on them in stages. So put those to one side, and I've got out the edges, the offcuts, so that I've got 2 opposite sides of each of these 4. Now I could glue them on now, but I don't know how the glue would react to water, because it would be Gorilla Glue, and I know that bubbles up in reaction to water. I don't know if the wood glue I've got would do that as well, so I'd rather not risk having to strip it all back and do it again. So I'm actually just going to shape these first, let them dry, and then glue them on. So these have been soaking for almost 2 hours now, so that should be plenty. So just take them out, do a pair at a time for obvious reasons. Come here. Right. Taking them out. I'm just going to pat them dry, so easy to work with. Now we kind of need 3 pairs of hands here. So I'm going to line up the rough side against the bottom of the foot here. I know I've got at least 5mm extra, so I'm going to give it 2mm below, and then do the same on the other side. This is probably going to take quite a bit of fiddling to get it about right. I want to get these in the middle of the veneer as well, in that direction. So a little overlap on the bottom. Okay, and then I'm just going to hold in place my blocks for the minute. Now this is where it takes a bit of patience and a bit of finesse just to get the right level of pressure on without snapping the wood. Probably could have done with slightly longer in the water, but we shall see. So, grab a clamp and bring pressure to bear on the wood. That one. Okay, so I've got my second batch with the wood bent round and drying. So now I'm coming to the trimming section here. So it's just kind of a gentle whittling, as it were. So you can be fairly tough with it to begin with, but then when you get down closer you really need to be a lot more gentle and cut it just to the line of the wood. And get it as flush as you possibly can, so that when you put the next veneer on, it should sit flat. Okay, so I'm on to the very last set of pieces for my chessboard, and I've I've had a learning curve and I've made a stupid mistake. So on every set previously, I have soaked my wood and then shaped it to to the piece before then gluing it when it was dry and still and slightly bent. And I got lazy and did all of these. I bent them and glued them in one go, and they've all stuck slightly to their stays, but this one is absolutely ruined. The others it took some doing to take off, and they've splintered a bit, but I've been able to stick things back on, but this is gone beyond, so I'm going to have to do something here. So what I'm going to do is put on a fresh piece of veneer, wet out the pot, and hopefully that should soak down into the glue and make this removable. Otherwise I've got to do some chipping. And this is my Stanley blade after trying to remove the stays. So for future reference, bend them first, and then when they're dry you can glue them on. Okay, so all the veneering's done and trimmed back to the appropriate level. So now I'm mixing up some filler, and again I'm using the powdered stuff, and I'm adding in some paint to get a really dark colour on it, and some glue, some PVA, that should hopefully make it a bit more flexible so that it's a bit more forgiving as the veneer flexes differently to the wood underneath. So here it goes. Everything's going to get a good layer on just so it's evenly covered, and then I can sand back to wherever I need it to be. So this should hopefully stabilise all the edges so it's ready for sanding. So here goes. So I'm going to start with my rooks. I haven't yet pyroed the inside of that. I'll do that after I sanded, because I'm debating whether or not to remove the middle point here. So start with a wee bit and work all the way around. Don't mind it being a little blobby, as long as it gets into the cracks, because there are some sizable cracks here. Okay, so I've given up on the sandpaper and file for the minute, because I only managed to get 5 done in the space of about 3 hours. But I've managed to get the rest of the dark set here at least cut back to wood in well, 1/3 of the time. In less than an hour I've done that using a Dremel gel or non-Dremel gel or whatever it is. So these are not perfect, they're still in need of sanding, but not as much sanding as to begin with. So I'm just going to get these back to I'll get them down to about 120 and then stick some oil on just to finish them. So that's the first half done, and my whole world is covered in dark dust. So I'm just going to have a quick sweep up of this. So that some of that's cleared off, and I'm going to shake myself off outside to get rid of the rest of this. So I'll do that, and then I'm going to carry on doing the light ones. So come back to you once I've finished all the sanding and I'm ready to put the first layer of finish on. Okay, so I've sanded down all my pieces to 120. So that's as far as I'm going to go for the minute, and I'm just going to give everything a coat of wax just to kind of rejuvenate, clean it a bit, and give it some protection, because it's going to be set down here for a couple of months. And this way you can get to see all the richness of the colour of the veneer before it's finished. So this is as far as I'm going to go for this video, and I'm going to move on to doing the box.